Think you know everything about U.S. presidents? Think again. Beyond the battles and big speeches, America's commanders-in-chief have some quirks you wouldn't believe. Imagine a president who loved his dog so much, he enlisted it in the army. Or how about a leader who sold historic White House treasures just to splash out on flashy clothes and extravagant home decor? Yes, these strange but true stories are part of the presidential past too. Buckle up, because we're diving into the bizarre, the unbelievable, and the downright hilarious facts about U.S. presidents that you definitely didn't learn in school. Let's get started with a wild ride through the odd corners of American presidential history. William Henry Harrison. William Henry Harrison became the 9th President of the United States in 1841. Before his election, his opponents tried to make fun of him by saying he'd rather stay in his log cabin and drink cider than be president. But Harrison turned the joke around and gave out whiskey in bottles that looked like little log cabins during his campaign. When it was time for his inauguration, Harrison made history by giving the longest speech ever. He talked for a whopping 90 minutes, saying over 8,000 words. It was a cold and rainy day, but Harrison didn't even wear a coat or hat during his speech. Unfortunately, just a month later, he got very sick and passed away. It's believed he caught pneumonia from being out in the bad weather during his long speech. Harrison holds the record for having the shortest presidency in U.S. history, lasting only 33 days. John Tyler. After William Henry Harrison died suddenly, there was confusion about what would happen next because it wasn't clear what powers the vice president, John Tyler, had. But Tyler believed he should become the president, and he managed to convince everyone else that he should take over. However, Tyler didn't have an easy time as president. People didn't like him very much. He was even kicked out of his own political party while he was president. Most of his cabinet quit because they didn't agree with his decisions. Tyler also became the first president to face impeachment. The newspapers weren't kind to him either. One editor called him a poor, miserable, despised imbecile, and the New York Times said he was the most unpopular public man that had ever held any office in the United States when he died. Even President Lincoln didn't seem to care much when Tyler passed away. He didn't even make an official statement of mourning, and flags didn't fly at half-mast. Tyler's time as president was certainly a tough one. Franklin Pierce. Franklin Pierce was the 14th President of the United States, but many people don't know much about him because he wasn't very popular. In fact, his own political party didn't want to nominate him for a second term because of how unpopular he was. When Pierce found out he wouldn't be nominated again, he reportedly said, "There is nothing left to do but get drunk." This suggests he turned to alcohol to cope with his disappointment. It's said that Pierce enjoyed drinking, which might explain a story about him allegedly being arrested for running over an old lady with his horse. While Pierce's presidency wasn't remembered for many great achievements, he did have an interesting life. He served as a general in the Mexican-American War and was known for his charisma and charm. However, his time as president was marked by divisions over slavery and other issues that made him unpopular with many Americans. James Buchanan. James Buchanan holds a unique record in American history. He's the only president who was unmarried. However, there's a lot of talk and rumors about his personal life. Some people speculate about his relationship with another politician, William Rufus King from Alabama. Buchanan and King lived together for over a decade, even though they could afford their own homes. Others, like Andrew Jackson, joked about them behind their backs, calling them Miss Nancy and Aunt Fancy. While Buchanan's relationship with King remains a topic of debate among historians, it's clear that he had a close bond with him. When King left for France in 1844, Buchanan wrote, "I am now solitary and alone, having no companion in the house with me. I have gone a-wooing several gentlemen, but have not succeeded with any one of them." Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson was the first president in American history to be impeached, but his childhood was far from easy. When his father passed away, his mother couldn't afford to take care of him and his brother. So, she sent them to work as indentured servants for a tailor. This meant they had to work for the tailor without pay until they were adults. After 2 years, Johnson and his brother couldn't take it anymore, so they ran away. The tailor was so upset that he offered a reward of $10 for anyone who could find them. But luckily, they were never caught. During his time working for the tailor, Johnson learned how to make clothes. Even when he became president, he used these skills to make all of his own suits. Ulysses Grant. Ulysses S. Grant, the 18th President of the United States, almost ended up in Abraham Lincoln's theater box on the tragic night of his assassination. Grant changed his plans at the last moment, and he later regretted it deeply. He believed he could have prevented the assassination if he had been there. Grant had some interesting quirks too. Despite his role in the Civil War, he couldn't bear to see blood. This might seem ironic given his military background. During his presidency, Grant took a strong stand against the Ku Klux Klan, a racist group terrorizing African Americans. He worked hard to dismantle them, but unfortunately they managed to regroup and continue their activities many years later. James Garfield, the 20th President of the United States, had a pretty amazing talent. He was ambidextrous. Even weirder, he could write in Greek with one hand and in Latin with the other hand at the same time. But unfortunately, Garfield's presidency was cut short. Just a few months into his time in office, an assassin shot him. Garfield didn't die right away, but he suffered for 11 weeks before passing away. Doctors tried to use a new invention, a metal detector created by Alexander Graham Bell, to find the bullet in Garfield's body. However, they faced some challenges. The metal bed springs in Garfield's bed messed up the results, making it hard for the doctors to locate the bullet accurately. To make matters worse, his doctors didn't keep things clean. They introduced bacteria into Garfield's body with their dirty, unsterilized fingers. When Chester A. Arthur became president, he wanted to spruce up the White House with new furniture. But to pay for it all, he came up with an unusual plan. He decided to sell off 24 wagon loads of historical items, like a pair of Abraham Lincoln's pants and one of John Quincy Adams' hats. Arthur wasn't just interested in redecorating, though. He had a taste for luxury himself. He owned lots of fancy clothes, including a whopping 80 pairs of pants. Because of his stylish wardrobe and elegant taste, people started calling him Elegant Arthur. Benjamin Harrison, the grandson of President William Henry Harrison, had a reputation for being quite formal and stiff around people. Some even called him the human iceberg because of his demeanor. But maybe there was more to it than meets the eye. Harrison was actually quite anxious, and some people mistook his anxiety for stiffness. One thing that made him anxious was the new electricity installed in the White House during his presidency. He was so scared of being electrocuted that he refused to touch the light switches. Instead, he would leave all the lights on, even when he went to bed at night. Theodore Roosevelt. Valentine's Day in 1884 was a very tragic day for Theodore Roosevelt. Both his first wife and mother died. Roosevelt was a tough guy, and he faced many challenges. Once, while giving a speech, someone shot him. Instead of panicking, Roosevelt calmly told the audience that he had been shot, but he wasn't too bothered by it. This is what he had to say about it: "I don't know whether you fully understand that I have just been shot. I give you my word, I do not care a rap about being shot, not a rap." He even finished his long speech with the bullet still stuck in his chest. Roosevelt was loved by many people, to the point that a toy maker invented teddy bears in his honor. This was because Roosevelt once refused to shoot a baby bear on a hunting trip. So, people thought it was a great way to remember his kindness and bravery. William Taft. William Howard Taft is often remembered for his large size, with many stories claiming he once got stuck in a bathtub, although historians say this might not be true. But there's another interesting story about him that many people don't know. At the time, toy makers thought that teddy bears would become less popular, so they wanted to create a new stuffed animal. They came up with an idea called Billy Possum. But here's the funny thing: it wasn't because Taft spared a baby possum or anything like that. Instead, it was because he once ate a huge possum for dinner. Despite toy makers' efforts to promote Billy Possum as a replacement for teddy bears, it didn't become popular like they hoped. People still preferred teddy bears, and even though there were some rude postcards made to discourage them, teddy bears continued to be loved by many. Warren Harding. Warren G. Harding wasn't exactly the most faithful husband. He cheated on his wife, Florence, with her close friend, Carrie Fulton Phillips. Their affair came to light when a bunch of love letters between them were found. But that's not all. Harding also had another fling with a woman named Nan Britton. She even wrote a book called The President's Daughter, claiming that her daughter was Harding's child. For a long time, people weren't sure if these stories were true. But in 2005, modern DNA testing finally confirmed that Harding was indeed the father of Britton's daughter. So it turns out that all those rumors about his affairs were actually true. Lyndon Johnson. When President John F. Kennedy was tragically assassinated, Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson took over as president. But there's a twist to how Johnson even survived to become president. During World War II, Johnson was on a plane named the Wabash Cannonball for a bombing mission in the South Pacific. Suddenly, he needed to use the bathroom urgently, so he got off the plane to relieve himself. While he was away, the Wabash Cannonball took off. Later, Johnson learned that the plane had crashed and everyone on board had died. If Johnson hadn't needed that bathroom break, he might have been on that plane and perished with the others. This stroke of luck changed the course of his life, eventually leading him to become president after Kennedy's assassination. Gerald Ford. His real name was Leslie Lynch King, Jr., but you might know him better as Gerald Ford, the 38th President of the United States. Here are some interesting facts about him. Unlike most presidents, Ford never got elected to be president or vice president by the people. He became vice president when Spiro Agnew resigned, and then became president when Richard Nixon resigned. Ford's daughter, Susan, hosted her senior prom at the White House. Imagine having your prom in such a historic place. Also, Ford survived not one, but 2 assassination attempts within just 17 days of each other. Both times, the assassins were women. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned on more interesting tidbits on scandals all throughout history.